So, we've reached the end of this trilogy, and I've just remembered that I have in fact nearly died a fourth time, so we will have a fourth video in the trilogy! Chin chin, and welcome to another edition of Tales from a Turtleneck. If you haven't done so already, please like, subscribe, and flick that little bell to be kept up to date with the latest tales as soon as they tumble onto YouTube. The summer holiday. That magical time full of endless possibilities. New countries to explore, new cuisine to try, new ways to die.
Oh, poetry.
Curiosity did indeed nearly kill the cat. Or in this case, drown it. If I had been a cat, what happened would never have happened, because cats famously don't like water. Unfortunately, I'm a strategically shaved frog. And I happen to love water, which is surprising given my track record. Water is just like all my relationships. I dive in headfirst and end up paying the price. Or attempt breaststroke while getting my woggle caught in my shorts. This particular holiday, we had chosen the French-speaking country of France. A regular holidaying choice for my parents because it's like England, but with better wine. We had gone away with our regular travelling companions, my godparents and their children, who, being similar ages to us, meant that many a hijinks was to be had. I never knew how my parents found the remote locations that we always ended up staying at, whether it was through a game of remote village roulette or through my dad's connections with the French resistance. But this holiday was no exception. After a grueling drive and a lengthy ferry crossing, which, despite our cars being side by side at the ferry port, had somehow ended up with our godparents and us ending up on different ferries, we eventually made it to this year's holiday hideaway, a converted set of outbuildings nestled in the Vosges Mountains. Ramshackle old farm buildings, stables, a sprawling garden with a play park. If I was to leave a review, it would be something along the lines of a combination of rustic French charm and this feels like the set of a horror movie. And horror was lurking right around the corner. Well, not right around the corner, further up the road a bit, through some trees. My dad, who was always up before the rest of us, would drive out each morning on reconnaissance missions to... Yes, money penny, yes. Oh, smack it right now. My dad, who was always up before the rest of us, would drive out each morning to locate baguettes, cheese, and interesting spots in which to eat them. Dad had found an enormous alpine lake with beach, outside flume, pedalos, and a floating island in the middle with its own slide. The lake was way off the beaten track, so I was surprised to see so many people had also stumbled across it. It even had its own set of moody lifeguards stationed around the edge. Perhaps they were moody because they couldn't find their way back to their cars through the impenetrable undergrowth. Or because 6 rowdy English children had rocked up and ruined their peaceful French ambiance. Once my parents had found a decent, and more importantly free, place for us to let off steam, we usually kept going back there until we'd squeezed all the joy there was to be had out of it. Despite being an alpine lake, the water was surprisingly balmy, and being fresh water, it didn't have that throat burn that accompanied swallowing seawater. The weather was glorious, and the trees around the edge of the lake helped shelter the vampires amongst us who feared the sun. On the first day at the lake, my father and godfather took us boys out on one of the pedlos and managed to get us lost on what is effectively a giant circle. The sun began to set as we cruised past the floating island in the middle of the lake, with only the distant sounds of the angry pedalo vendor echoing in the background. "Come back here, you thieving English bastards!" It was one of the most beautiful moments of my young life. But looks can be deceptive. On our return to the lake, I decided to be a big brave boy and try out the flume. All was going well until I reached the bottom, where a collection of rocks were waiting for me. I hobbled to my feet and looked to the moody lifeguard for support, but his poker face gave nothing away. As I my way up the beach, I couldn't help thinking that the rocks hadn't been there the day before. Word had evidently spread around the mountain villages, as our second trip to the lake was significantly busier than the first, in spite of the booby traps. The shady spots were all taken, so the pasty folk were left to vaporise on the beach. By the time I made it back to my sunbathing mum, she informed me that Dad had gone into the lake for a swim. I looked about for him, but in the melee of people, I couldn't pick him out. My godparent's son, whose eyes are 2 less than mine and twice as strong, then pointed out the back of my dad's head bobbing out towards the island in the middle of the lake. Telling Mum we had found Dad, we both rushed headlong into the water and eagerly raced out to meet him. Ever since we had first spotted that mysterious island in the middle of the wake, calm it down. Ever since we had first spotted that mysterious island in the middle of the lake, we had made it our mission to get to it and claim it. Is there anything more exotic than a load of plastic barrels crudely roped together with a rusty slide on top? Both being strong swimmers, we made good time, front crawling out after my dad's floating head. As we got within 2 crawls, Dad turned around to reveal he'd become a startled Frenchman with an even more startling moustache, who promptly swam off as we approached. So it turns out the back of my dad's head looks like the back of a lot of people's heads. While we're on the subject, the front of my dad's head is often mistaken too. My dad has been mistaken for the actor James Nesbitt on several occasions, and while they do have a similar face shape, they have completely different coloured eyes, and unless he's a Saints fan, I don't think it likely that James Nesbitt will be attending a Southampton football match either. My dad is also one of those annoyingly blessed people who just has to look at the sun to go brown. This has, however, led to him being mistaken for a local in several sunny locations around the world, leading to a ridiculous French farce of them both going round and round misunderstanding what the other one says. Ironically, this French farce has never actually happened in France because my dad speaks French. Within seconds of Dad's doppelganger swimming off, panic set in. It turned out the island in the middle of the lake was much further out than we'd first anticipated, and I suddenly realised that I was massively out of my depth. The water in the centre of the lake was much darker and colder than near the shore, which seemed miles away. I chose to completely shut down and revert to factory setting. Blind panic mode, fully initiated. I grabbed hold of a buoy to keep myself above the water as my legs had decided to check out.
Goodbye.
The buoy started jerking from side to side and I began spinning round and round like I was riding some form of watery bucking bronco. It was then I realised the boy I was clinging to wasn't a boy at all. I mean, it was a boy, but not a boy. A boy. A human boy. my godparents' son. In my panic, I had clung on to the nearest floating object, and in my desperate efforts, had accidentally submerged him in the process. As you can imagine, he was thrilled. Like the creature from the Black Lagoon, this hand emerged out the water and gripped my head.
Steady.
Pushing me under. Next thing I knew, I was floundering about in the watery darkness with my godparents' son clinging to my elf ears like the handlebars of a jet ski. As I flailed about in the blackness of the lake, I recalled a conversation I'd had with Dad the previous day about what types of fish lived in there. He had mentioned that there were probably massive eels slithering beneath us, and the thought of being devoured by Nessie's French cousins snapped me back into action. Like a shit Free Willy, I breached the surface of the water and flopped down, shaking off my godparents' son. But he wasn't keen on parting with this floater, and so a tussle ensued. In a whirlwind of watery limbs, each of us would attempt to submerge the other one whilst trying to avoid being sunk ourselves. Before the mutual drowning got any worse, my actual dad suddenly appeared, as did my godfather, and in stunned silence, we were dragged back to the beach. It transpired that my dad had decided to take my little brother onto the flume. As they were sliding down, he spotted the chaos unfold and decided to let go of my brother and come and rescue us. Rather than let bygones be bygones, a Mexican standoff formed. My godmother and her son scowling at me and Mum across an actual line being drawn in the sand. I made the first move, and despite still being traumatised myself, apologised for what had transpired. But it fell on deaf ears, which really upset me. Just to put the icing on this cake of tension, the moody lifeguard showed up with my brother and proceeded to bollock all of us for our reckless behaviour. This then led into a very impressive 7-way multilingual row, with my dad arguing with the lifeguard,
My mum arguing with my dad.
My godmother arguing with my mum. My godfather arguing with my godmother. And my godparents' son arguing with me.
The incident in the lake had taken place bang smack in the middle of our stay, and there was still the best part of a week to get through. For the sake of the rest of the holiday, my parents and my godparents managed to broker a peace deal. And thanks to the children of the French family staying next door, acting as diplomatic envoys, my godparents' son and I also came to an understanding before the days of the holiday totally ran out. The rest of the holiday went without a bang, other than my little sister falling down the stairs on the second to last day, which she managed to do on every family holiday, so it was more of a tradition rather than an event. We thought it best not to return to the lake, so we stuck to land-based activities for the remainder of the trip. We returned to France the following year, to another location and to another lake, but there were no dramas. Well, not for me, anyway. Edgar Allan Poe once wrote, So lovely was the loneliness of a wild lake. He missed out the bit that said, And stay the hell away from the water as the Frenchman's head a fool will make. For he ain't your daddy, he's a fake. And the eels will come and to the depths they will take you. I wondered why she kept glancing back at me in that creepy way. It was mortifying for all involved. Romance was officially dead.